Hi everybody, Fran here on Alan History Nerd. This video is going to go over the pre-release for 2022 on Unit 2J, America a Nation Divided, that starts circa 1845 and runs through until 1877. Getting straight into it then, part 1 is the origins of the American Civil War. Anything in yellow is what AQA left on the pre-release and anything crossed out is what AQA removed. In terms of the North and South, circa 1845, we've got the legacy of the past as the only bullet point that stayed, encapsulating the Missouri Compromise nullification crisis, and then we've got Southern fears of modernisation and the moving frontier. What's interesting is when we move into attempts to maintain the Union, we get a theme that continues, and that theme is westward expansion. So we've got Manifest Destiny, the Mexican War, Wilmot Proviso, we've got the 1850 Compromise, and what that might indicate is that the legacy of the past bullet point and the section that has remained on attempts to maintain the Union may come together to create a single question, whether that be a source question or an essay. Then in the final section, we've got a second block of yellow that's grouped together, which encapsulates the rise of the Republicans, hardening of positions, which is a bit of a code name for Dred Scott, Lincoln Douglas, Harper's Ferry, splitting the Democrats. And then at the end, we've got the outbreak of war starting from the 1860 election and running through to Fort Sumter and that second wave of secession. There will be 2 questions on your exam from this part of the course. What seems to have emerged as a result of the pre-release is that there will probably be a question on something to do with westward expansion and its impact on relations between the North and the South. In terms of the second bit that's stayed on, there's quite a few more questions up for grabs. It could be on the rise of the Republican, it could be on the level of tension within a certain time frame, or it could be a question looking at why war will ultimately break out. But there does seem to be 2 clear sections in the pre-release, that grouping at the top and that grouping at the bottom. Using that last slide then of the pre-release, I have created just a simple checklist of what you need to know going into that exam on the 10th of June. For the North and South circa 1845, you need to know the Missouri Compromise, nullification crisis, Southern fears of modernisation and the moving frontier. For attempts to maintain the Union, you need to know Manifest Destiny, the Mexican War covering its causes, of course, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. You need to know the Wilmot Proviso. Remember, that does happen in the midst of the Mexican War. And we need to know the 1850 Compromise. So we need to know the key chronology leading up to the Compromise. We need to know the Compromise itself, the debates that happen when it is in Congress, and then its impact, which includes things like the impact of the new stricter fugitive slave law. I have put on the end of this that it is worth knowing the presidency of Franklin Pierce, which encapsulates Gadsden Purchase, Cuba and Ostend Manifesto, because some of that links into the concept of westward expansion too. The last section of the course is the outbreak of war, and what you need to know there is the different reasons for the rise of the Republican Party, Dred Scott, Lincoln Douglas, Harper's Ferry, split of the Democrats, the election of 1860. You need to know how the election leads to the first wave of secession and creation of the Confederacy. I would also be looking at the compromises that are put forward in this period. They will ultimately fail. And then I'd be looking at Fort Sumter and then the second wave of secession and actual outbreak of war. Moving on to the second year content, which is the Civil War and Reconstruction. Again, there will be 2 questions on this part of the course. So there's 2 from first year, 2 from second year. And again, we've got 2 blocks of yellow that have stayed and seem to suggest sort of the 2 key areas where questions will come from. In terms of the war, what has stayed is the course of the war. So that's the military campaigns, the reason for Confederate defeat. And then we've got the state of America at the end of the Civil War, so the cost of the war for the North, for the South, and the prospect of reconciliation. So there's probably going to be a question on the war, but maybe focusing perhaps on the end of the war and the cost for the South and the North, perhaps. But I would definitely make sure you know the military campaigns, the battles, and why the Confederacy lose. And then we've got a second block of yellow that stayed, and the common theme in those bullet points is Andrew Johnson. We've got the 14th Amendment, so Johnson is president when that amendment comes about. We've got his presidency as a bullet point, and then we have got a final bullet point that does have Andrew Johnson sort of lingering over with the Christmas Day amnesty, and we've got the election of 1868. The bullet point at the end does start drifting into Grant, so you do need to know him, his policies, his conflict with Congress, but part of me does wonder whether it has stayed because of the Johnson elements in that bullet point that then would fit nicely into a broader question, whether that be sources or an essay on Johnson's presidency. but again, I would cover Grant just to be safe. Again, putting that into like a simple checklist that you can use to revise. So you need to know the war, you need to know the key battles in the Civil War and the reasons for Confederate defeat. You need to know the cost of the war for the South and the North and the prospect of reconciliation at the end of the war. And then we've got the second section, which is early Reconstruction. So you need to know Andrew Johnson very well, I would be saying. The 14th Amendment is a separate bullet point in the specification, so make sure you know that. We've got the Reconstruction Acts, we've got Johnson's presidency, and then going into the last section, which is Radical Reconstruction. Again, we've got this sort of overlap of Andrew Johnson that runs down there, his Christmas Day amnesty in particular, but also the election of 1868. And then we have just got this little section on Grant, which I would make sure you know, which is his aims, his policies, and so on.
Huge thank you to Fran for that really good video going through the pre-release material for America, a Nation Divided, circa 1845 to 1877. And if you use that along with all the content videos that there are on the American Civil War playlist, that should really help you get prepared for your upcoming exam. Huge thank you again to Fran. You may have seen already, but Alan History Nerd has now got TikTok as well, so you might want to check that out. If you like the video, please hit like, and in the comments, again, show your appreciation to Fran. Thank you very much again for watching, and there'll be more videos coming soon.